David Ghantt was an ordinary poor man, but he used to play with bundles of cash for 16 hours a day. Yet, his own pocket always remained empty. In reality, David was the supervisor of an armored car for a famous security firm called Loomis Fargo. His job was to transfer millions of dollars between banks. All day long, he guarded this money, but his own salary was hardly $8 per hour. How long could he suppress his dreams under the heavy blanket of honesty? One day, fed up with this honest life, David decided to do something wrong. This is the interesting story of the 1997 Loomis Fargo bank heist. A heist in which an ordinary man forced the FBI to launch an international manhunt. And this story later became the foundation of the 2016 Hollywood film Masterminds. Amazingly, David Ghantt even acted in the movie based on his own life. And unfortunately, he didn't receive any money for it. David Ghantt was a retired soldier of the Gulf War. He had once defended his country, and now he was a supervisor at the armored car company Loomis Fargo. Cash in his hands, empty pockets in his pants, and the burden of family responsibilities on his shoulders. He worked 75 to 80 hours a week, but in return, he earned just $8.50 an hour. David Ghantt was tired of his routine. Loneliness and the disappointment of not doing anything big were eating him from the inside. These were the conditions that created a strange restlessness in David's heart. And finally, he began having dangerous thoughts. Once dishonesty entered his mind, the devil opened a new door for him. That door was named Kelly Campbell. Kelly also worked at Loomis Fargo. She was bold, sharp, and mysterious. During her job at Loomis Fargo, she somehow became friends with David. They often met even after office hours. Their friendship grew so deep that even after Kelly quit her job, they continued to meet. One day, Kelly introduced David to her friend, Steve Chambers. Steve was a small-time criminal who always dreamed of making quick money. When Steve learned that David was the armored vehicle supervisor at Loomis Fargo, a mischievous idea was born in his mind. The idea of robbing the money. But to make this idea successful, it was necessary for David to join them. Both of them began trying to convince him. David Ghantt, whose intentions were already shaken, found Steve Chambers' idea like a push to a falling wall. At first, David was scared because he had never done anything wrong in his life. But Steve's style forced him to slip. He showed David dreams of a comfortable and luxurious life. David's frustration, Kelly's support, and Steve's greed all brought him to a point from where it was very difficult to turn back. And then began the planning of the master plan. Since Steve was a small-time criminal, Kelly had no experience, and David was not clever either. Their plan turned out to be something that would make a professional thief laugh. The plan was simple. On the night of October 4th, 1997, after duty, David would stay in the vault. He would turn off the security cameras, steal the cassette tapes, and then load the money into the company van and run away. The plan was that after the robbery, David would immediately take $50,000 to Mexico. This amount was chosen because at that time, only this much could legally be carried across the American border. The remaining cash would stay with Steve Chambers, and once things cooled down, David would return, and the money would be equally distributed. But there was a big flaw in the plan. If David took such a huge risk and escaped to Mexico with only $50,000, why would Steve later share the stolen millions with him? But blinded by greed, David never thought about this. And then the night finally came. On October 4th, 1997, at 6 p.m., David sent the trainee staff home. Now, he was alone with the vault. Scared and trembling, David went inside the vault. As per plan, he disabled 2 security cameras and removed the cassette tapes that had the recordings. But by mistake, he forgot to turn off the third camera hidden in the corner of the vault. This third camera recorded the entire Loomis Fargo robbery for the next several hours. Unaware of this, David began lifting cash from the vault. But this time, he wasn't counting or transporting the cash. He had to empty the entire vault all by himself. Most of the cash was in $20 bills. According to estimates, there were more than 800,000 notes, or over 8,000 bundles. Loading so many bundles into the van required a lot of time. For the next 2 hours, David kept filling the van with cash. After loading nearly $17.3 million, he didn't even realize that he had just carried out the second largest heist in American history. Once the van was full, David danced with joy. And that dance, too, was recorded on the third camera. The next morning, when other Loomis Fargo employees arrived and tried to open the vault, they found the keys missing. Police were called, and since only David Ghantt was absent from work, he became the prime suspect from the very beginning. When the security camera footage was checked, all suspicion turned into certainty. And David's victory dance added salt to the wound. The footage even showed David repeatedly messaging someone on his pager during the robbery. This proved he wasn't working alone. Now police began searching for David Ghantt and his accomplices. 2 days later, FBI agents found a cash van abandoned in the woods. Inside, nearly $3 million in cash was left behind, likely due to weight and lack of time. The 2 stolen CCTV cassettes were also found inside the van. Now, David and his partners had about $14 million in their possession, most of it in $20 bills, which weren't marked and couldn't easily be tracked. According to the plan, David had already fled to Mexico with $50,000. There, he checked into a luxury beach resort and began living. Meanwhile, police and FBI launched advertisements in newspapers, offering a $500,000 reward for information about the robbery. They appealed to citizens. If you see someone who suddenly came into a lot of money, report it immediately. Because of this campaign, police started receiving countless calls. So many that they had to arrange a separate desk just for the Loomis Fargo case. Most calls were useless, but one call gave the stalled investigation a breakthrough. A man informed police that his neighbor had suddenly come into a lot of money. That neighbor was none other than Steve Chambers, the mastermind behind it all. The FBI secretly began monitoring Steve. They discovered that Steve and his wife Michelle had bought a big, expensive house, a new BMW, and were spending lavishly on luxury items. When the FBI checked their bank accounts, they found large deposits made right after October 4th. A bank teller even reported that Michelle deposited the money in $20 bills and asked how much could be deposited without alerting federal authorities. Now, FBI suspicion had turned into certainty. Steve Chambers and his wife Michelle were definitely involved with David. But investigators stayed quiet, wanting to trace the entire gang, and especially David. Within just 10 days, the whole story began unfolding. The FBI tapped Steve Chambers' phone. In one recorded conversation, the name of David Ghantt came up, and the FBI's ears perked. The conversation revealed that Steve and another man named Mike McKinney were plotting to murder David in Mexico. Overcome by greed, Steve wanted to keep all the money for himself. The FBI arrested Mike McKinney, who confessed everything. He revealed that David was hiding in Mexico and explained how they had transferred the stolen money. Shocking details emerged. After the robbery, they had transferred the money into another vehicle at the parking lot of the printing press where Steve actually worked. They were in such a hurry that they left $3 million behind in the van, which was later found in the woods, right next to Steve's office and just a few kilometers from the Loomis Fargo warehouse. By now, within 10 days, the FBI already had solid leads on the entire gang. But they waited for 5 months, collecting concrete evidence. Finally, on March 1st, 1998, David Ghantt was arrested in Mexico. The next day, Steve Chambers, his wife Michelle, and Kelly Campbell were arrested in Charlotte, North Carolina. The FBI recovered 88% of the stolen money. The rest had been blown by Steve on luxury items. Steve Chambers was sentenced to 11 years. David Ghantt, 7 years. And David was also billed for the missing $3 million, which he had never even spent. In 2016, the movie Masterminds was made on this story. Producers hired David as a consultant, but he was never paid, because by law, any money he earned would go directly toward paying off his debt. At that time, David worked as a construction laborer. He said, "Even if I work my whole life, I could never repay this debt. Today, David Ghantt lives in Jacksonville, Florida with his wife and children. He works as a construction worker to support his family. And on social media, he shares his story so others can learn from his mistakes. We hope you like this video from iFlare TV. Don't forget to like and share. And thank you for your kind comments. See you in the next amazing video.